They say timing is everything, but sometimes it's the worst timing that changes everything. Our main character, Lily, hadn't planned on spending the weekend at her sister's house. It was meant to be a quiet visit, a little escape from her own busy life. Her sister Emma welcomed her warmly, and they spent the first evening catching up, laughing and reminiscing. Emma's husband, Max, was around, but seemed to stay in the background, polite yet distant, as usual. Early the next morning, Lily woke up and decided to freshen up before anyone else stirred. Still half asleep, she padded through the hallway, searching for a spare towel she remembered her sister mentioning. She absent-mindedly opened the bathroom door, expecting nothing but empty space, and instead found herself face to face with Max in the shower. There he stood, frozen, his eyes wide with shock as their gazes locked. Lily's breath caught, and for what felt like an eternity, neither of them moved. The hot steam filled the small room, blurring the edges, but the intensity of the moment was sharp and undeniable. She quickly backed out, closing the door with a thud, her heart pounding in her chest. If you're curious to see how this unexpected moment spirals into something no one could have predicted, make sure to watch till the end. And if you're enjoying the suspense, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories, just like this one. Lily, now flushed and mortified, rushed back to her room, replaying the image over and over in her mind. The incident was accidental, but somehow it left an imprint she couldn't shake. And as the day went on, she caught herself glancing at Max, wondering if he was thinking about it too. The encounter lingered in Lily's mind, replaying like a vivid dream that wouldn't fade. Every time she closed her eyes, the memory flashed back. Max, standing there, eyes wide with surprise, surrounded by steam. She could still feel the heat that had filled the room, and it wasn't just from the shower. The next morning, she tried to brush it off. But every little thing seemed to bring her back to that moment. She found herself more aware of Max than ever before. Sitting across the breakfast table from him, she noticed details she'd somehow missed before. The way his eyes crinkled slightly when he smiled, the relaxed confidence he carried, even the way he stirred his coffee with such focus. It was like seeing him for the first time. Max seemed quieter than usual too. When she looked his way, he would shift slightly, just enough to make her wonder if he was avoiding her gaze. Yet, in those moments when their eyes met, there was something unspoken there, lingering in the air between them. She told herself she was imagining it, that it was just her own awkwardness making things feel tense, but it was undeniable. Something had shifted. As the day passed, it seemed that every interaction with Max had taken on a strange, new weight. When they crossed paths in the hallway, neither spoke, but she couldn't ignore the slight pause in his step, the way his eyes would flick toward her before he continued on his way. Even the simplest exchanges, a polite nod, a brief smile, felt loaded, carrying a hint of something neither of them dared acknowledge aloud. Lily tried to focus on spending time with her sister, helping around the house and engaging in light-hearted conversation. Yet, every time Max entered the room, she became hyper-aware of his presence. It was as if an invisible cord connected them, tugging at her attention no matter how much she tried to ignore it. She wondered if Emma noticed anything different about her, if her sister could sense the quiet tension pulsing beneath the surface. But Emma seemed blissfully unaware, laughing and chatting as usual, while Lily and Max exchanged glances that spoke volumes. The smallest gestures now felt significant. She'd catch him looking at her out of the corner of her eye, and the moment she turned toward him, he'd glance away, a faint hint of a smile flickering at the edge of his lips. When she'd reach for a glass or a plate, Sometimes their hands would brush, just a second too long to be accidental. Those tiny, almost imperceptible touches sent a thrill through her that she couldn't explain. She'd retreat to her room, trying to clear her head, but the memory of his gaze stayed with her, stirring something she couldn't quite name. As night fell, the tension in the house felt almost tangible, like static in the air before a storm. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of her feelings. 1,000 thoughts raced through her mind, and no matter how much she wanted to ignore them, each one brought her back to him. It was unsettling and exciting, all at once, a tug-of-war between wanting to forget and hoping that maybe, just maybe, he felt the same. The days that followed felt like a carefully crafted dance between Lily and Max, each step drawing them closer without a single word spoken about it. Little moments that might have seemed innocent to anyone else now felt charged. The kitchen, for example, turned into a silent stage for these accidental encounters. Every morning, Lily would wander in, pretending not to notice when Max came up beside her to reach for the coffee or brush, past her, just close enough to feel the warmth of his arm. Each time he entered the room, her heart raced, her senses heightened. She noticed how his gaze would sometimes linger a bit longer, his eyes catching hers in a way that left her breathless. These moments were quick, but every second felt significant, like a secret that only they understood. Conversations between them became a new thrill. Whenever they spoke, even briefly, there was a new energy in his tone, an added softness that hadn't been there before. "How did you sleep?" he'd ask in the morning, his eyes searching hers, and she'd respond with a shy smile, answering in a voice quieter than usual. It felt like every word had another layer, a silent message hidden between each syllable. One afternoon, as she was preparing lunch, Max wandered into the kitchen. He leaned casually against the counter, watching her as she moved about, chopping and stirring. She could feel his eyes on her, and her pulse quickened under his gaze. "Need any help?" he asked, a playful edge in his voice. She looked up, meeting his gaze with a smirk, handing him a tomato and a knife. "Only if you can handle the pressure," she teased, challenging him with a slight raise of her eyebrow. He chuckled, stepping closer to take the tomato, their fingers brushing in a way that neither of them pulled away from. The air between them was thick, charged with something that words couldn't quite capture. As the days passed, these accidental run-ins grew more frequent and intentional. Passing each other in the hallway became an excuse for a subtle touch or a shared glance that lingered just a second too long. She felt her heart skip every time their hands brushed, or he stepped closer than he needed to, filling the space with a kind of magnetic pull that neither of them seemed willing or able to resist. They would find themselves alone, each encounter deepening the quiet understanding between them. Once, as she walked past him in the living room, he placed a hand gently on her shoulder, a brief yet electrifying touch that left her skin tingling. She looked up at him, a question in her eyes, but he only offered a small, knowing smile, letting his hand drop as he stepped away. It was a simple touch, but the effect stayed with her long after he left the room. At night, she would lie awake, thinking about these moments, wondering if he felt the same stirring excitement. Every glance, every shared smile had become a quiet language of its own, a language only they seemed to understand. She couldn't ignore the thrill that came with each interaction, a thrill that seemed to grow with each passing day, building an unspoken connection that was both exhilarating and unnerving. Now, even the smallest gesture between them felt deliberate. A fleeting look, a soft smile, a brush of fingers that lasted just a heartbeat too long. Each moment became an invitation, a hint that left her wondering what might happen next. And yet neither of them dared to speak it out loud. The tension simmered, building slowly like the warm pressure before a storm, each encounter leaving her wanting more. The house was draped in silence, everyone else asleep, leaving only Lily and Max awake, caught in that fragile space between night and dawn. Shadows softened the edges of the room, lending it an almost dreamlike quality, but the intensity between them was sharper than ever. They found themselves standing close, closer than they ever had before, the silence between them filled with a new awareness. Without a word, they stepped toward each other, as if drawn by a force too strong to resist. Her heart pounded, and she could feel his warmth before they even touched. Then, in one shared breath, the gap closed, and his hand found her shoulder, sliding up to rest gently against her cheek. Her eyes closed instinctively as his thumb traced the outline of her jaw, an almost reverent gesture that sent a shiver through her. In that single moment, the tension of the past days melted away, replaced by something undeniable. Their hands moved instinctively, exploring, holding, pressing against one another, each touch more urgent than the last. Their lips met, tentative at first, as if savouring the very beginning, then deepening with a hunger neither of them had expected. Every kiss was a confession, every touch an acknowledgement of what they'd been holding back. She wrapped her arms around him, pulling him closer, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat against her own. There was something breathtaking in the way they moved together, unhurried yet intense, savouring every second as if time had stopped just for them. His hands found her waist, guiding her gently, his touch firm yet soft, each movement pulling her deeper into the moment. They were lost in each other, the world outside fading into the background as they surrendered to the pull that had been building all this time. Breathless, they continued, their bodies and minds aligning in a way that felt both new and inevitable. There was a raw honesty in the way they embraced, an unspoken understanding that words would only complicate. In this space, there was no need for explanations, no need to hold back, only the closeness they'd been too careful to avoid before. The room was filled with warmth, and every touch ignited something deeper, every kiss leaving them both wanting more. They moved together with a natural rhythm, the urgency building as they explored this newfound connection. Nothing else mattered. Nothing else existed outside this moment. As they lost themselves completely in each other, the tension they'd carried, unspoken and carefully contained, finally found its release. Morning light filtered through the curtains, casting soft shadows across the room, but Lily couldn't shake the weight of the night before. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, heart racing as memories flooded back. Every kiss, every touch. The thrill of the night still tingled in her veins, but it was overshadowed by a rising tide of guilt and confusion. What had they done? As she turned over, the empty space beside her felt heavy with what they had shared. It had felt so right in the moment, so liberating, yet now it twisted in her stomach like a knot. She thought of Max, and the way he'd held her, the warmth of his body pressed against hers. But reality was setting in, and with it came a rush of uncertainty. When she finally emerged from her room, she found the house bustling with life. Emma was in the kitchen, chatting with Max, who looked surprisingly at ease, a lightness to his laughter that made her heart ache. Did he feel the same way she did, or had he already managed to compartmentalize their night, leaving it behind like a dream? Lily forced herself to join the conversation, her smile feeling more like a mask than ever. As they exchanged pleasantries, she was acutely aware of the unspoken bond that now lay between her and Max. Every glance they shared felt electric, but there was also a palpable tension, a silent acknowledgement of the secret they were both trying to navigate. Later, as she washed the dishes, she caught a glimpse of Max leaning against the counter, his expression thoughtful. Their eyes met for just a moment, and a rush of memories flickered in her mind. The warmth of his breath against her skin, the intensity of their connection. But with that warmth came a wave of anxiety. She couldn't help but wonder how long they could keep this hidden from Emma and the rest of the family. The afternoon wore on, and the easy banter they once shared now felt heavy with unsaid words. She noticed how they both treaded carefully around each other, their movements cautious and deliberate. The accidental touches that had once felt so natural were now loaded with meaning, and every shared glance was laced with the fear of discovery. Lily's heart raced each time Max entered the room, her mind swirling with thoughts of the previous night. How had they crossed that line? And what did it mean for both of them moving forward? The thrill of their connection battled with the guilt that came from betraying the trust of her sister. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing on the edge of a precipice, one misstep away from a fall that could change everything. As night fell, Lily found herself unable to sleep, thoughts racing through her mind. She couldn't help but replay every moment, searching for answers to questions that seemed impossible to voice. What did they mean to each other now? Could they go back to pretending nothing had happened? The silence of the house felt oppressive, each creak and whisper amplifying her internal struggle. In the darkness, she wrestled with the reality of their actions and what it would mean for the future. Would they continue down this path, embracing the thrill, or would the weight of their choices pull them apart? The confusion, excitement, and fear intertwined in a way that left her feeling more lost than ever. And as she lay there, she realized that nothing would ever be the same again. Around them, Lily and Max moved through the house as if navigating a minefield, each encounter fraught with the weight of their shared secret. Every glance and smile felt like a reminder of the fire they had ignited, and yet it was the very spark that threatened to consume them. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Lily found Max sitting alone on the porch, his silhouette framed by the fading light. She hesitated for a moment, a whirlpool of emotion swirling inside her, but then she stepped out, drawn to him like a moth to a flame. "Hey," she said softly, taking a seat beside him, the space between them charged with unsaid words. "Hey," he replied, his gaze fixed on the horizon, as if searching for something beyond the sunset. The silence stretched, but this time it felt different. There was a heaviness in the air, an unspoken understanding that they both felt. "We need to talk." Lily finally broke the silence, her heart racing. Max nodded, his jaw tightening. "Yeah, I know." As the shadows lengthened, they shared their thoughts, their fears spilling out like a flood. They spoke of the thrill and the excitement, of the moments that had felt so right but now felt wrong. They couldn't ignore the reality of their actions, the potential fallout on their families, the hurt it could cause Emma, and the risk of everything unraveling. "We can't keep doing this," Lily said, her voice trembling with the weight of her decision. "It's not fair to anyone. I don't want to hurt Emma. She deserves better." Max's eyes darkened, filled with the same turmoil. "I feel the same way. It's just hard. It was so easy to lose ourselves in each other. But we have to think about what comes next. We can't let this become a bigger problem than it already is," Lily insisted, her heart aching at the thought of what they had to do. They sat in silence, the weight of their choices heavy in the air. With each passing moment, the realization solidified. They needed to end it before it spiraled out of control. "Let's just Bury this, Max said, finally, his voice thick with emotion. We'll keep it as a secret, something that happened in a moment of weakness. No one has to know. Lily nodded, tears stinging her eyes as she faced the truth. Yeah, it'll be our secret. But we have to maintain distance, for everyone's sake. Max reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers for one last time. The warmth of his touch sent a shiver through her, a bittersweet reminder of what they were giving up. I'll always care about you, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. And I you, she replied, the ache in her chest deepening. As they sat together, the reality of their decision hung heavy in the air. They were choosing to walk away from something that had brought them both so much joy and yet had the potential to destroy everything they loved. With a final squeeze of her hand, Max stood up, stepping back from their shared moment. Let's not complicate things anymore. We'll be fine. Just let's act like it never happened. Lily nodded, forcing a smile through her tears, her heart breaking as she watched him walk away. In that moment, she felt the weight of their choices and the bitter sweetness of their parting. As she turned back to the house, the world felt different, quieter, emptier, yet somehow filled with a sense of closure. They had made their choice, a difficult but necessary one, and now it was time to move forward, carrying the weight of their secret in their hearts, forever changed by the brief moment of passion that had ignited between them. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more thrilling tales, don't forget to hit that like button and share this video with your friends. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel for more captivating stories and twists that keep you on the edge of your seat. Leave a comment below to let me know what you thought of the story, and stay tuned for the next adventure. Thank you for watching.